Hey everyone, welcome to the Func Med Nation podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Steve Noseworthy. The views and opinions expressed by my guests in this podcast are not necessarily consistent with my own. However, I do my best to be respectful of their views and opinions as they express them, even if they differ from my own. Now let's get to the podcast. So today my guest is Dr. Russell Jaffe. He's an MD, PhD. He's trained as an internist and an immunologist. He is double board certified in clinical pathology with a subspecialty certification in chemical pathology. He's also a fellow of several different medical societies. Dr. Jaffe has helped advance several adjunctive healthcare approaches, including medical acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, certified clinical nutrition, health coaching, and the use of predictive biomarkers. Enabling primary proactive prevention in clinical practice is part of Dr. Jaffe's mission to speed the transition from sick care to healthful caring in policy, practice, and research. With over 100 peer-reviewed publications, invited chapters and books, Dr. Jaffe speaks at continuing professional education conferences and technology innovation forums. Dr. Jaffe is the director of ELISA Act Biotechnologies and the nutraceutical company PERC. He's also serving as the founding fellow of the Health Studies Collegium, and he works and lives in Virginia. And before we get to the interview, I have to say I just had a wonderful time talking to somebody who has such a broad and varied background. He quite often refers to himself through the interview as eclectic, and his background is certainly that. And I think that you will find his insights and his manner captivating and engaging. I hope you enjoy the interview. I certainly enjoyed being part of that conversation. Why don't we start with a big welcome? I appreciate taking time out of what I'm sure is a pretty busy schedule for you. And one of the first things that I wanted to start with, Russell, is I like to go very big picture and then start to narrow down. And you've got a very interesting background. You're an MD, you're a PhD, and I'm sure that that probably doesn't encompass all of your experience and expertise. But I'm always interested in how and why people deviate from the genesis point of their core education to end up wherever it is they are 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So if you look back on your career, what was the biggest turning point? Or let's say, what's the first turning point where you started to say, I think I see something other than what I'm being taught right now. Let me go explore this and add it to the experience and the knowledge that I've garnered so far.
Well, I was a young resident at the National Institutes of Health, NIH, in Bethesda, Maryland. And I heard that this guy named Qing Nuan Wu put needles into people and got results we could not get. So I went to debunk him.
Oh.
And that led to a 7-year apprenticeship in TCM and acupuncture.
Very interesting.
So while I was continuing at then the senior staff at NIH, I was also in his training program along with Patch Adams. I don't know if you remember Patch from
I do.
From the movie Patch.
Sure. Yeah.
Jim Johnson, who was his aide de camp, and just a few. But Qing could see that acupuncture in America was going to become a profession, not a hobby.
And this was, what year was this, Russell?
1973 to 1979.
Okay, so this was very early in the,
you asked me what was my turning point, and I think Qing was the turning point.
He was the turning point. So as you made the transition from the Western medicine mindset, which has its own unique set of characteristics, was it a mental culture shock for you?
Oh, absolutely. You can call it cognitive dissonance, because I had been programmed and taught things that just were outdated or just not true or just true by convention because we believe it. When, as a student, I would ask why, I would be told to go study for an exam and that why would come later, but it never came.
So did you start to question then either the fundamental value of a conventional medicine mindset? Or did you still think, well, this has value, it just doesn't tell the whole story?
No, I consider myself eclectic. I consider myself to be the integration of all my experiences.
Yeah.
But to be specific, I started with one medical school class, and then I put a PhD in biochemistry in the middle. And so I taught my classmates. I taught biochemistry as a student teacher to the people that I graduated with.
Interesting.
And a little curious note, I was the first student at Boston University, maybe in the country, to get 3 degrees on one day. So I got an AB, an MD, and a PhD. So my parents could finally go to a graduation.
Oh, good for you. So if that chance meeting back in the early 70s was the starting point of you shifting your mindset and how you think about health and well-being, if you look at different stops along the way between that point and where you are now, what were I call them pivot points. What were the pivot points that took your studies and even perhaps your practice off in a different direction that you didn't expect?
Well, near the end of my apprenticeship with Quing, I heard that there was Dr. Ramamurti Mishra, who had written the textbook of yoga psychology and commentaries on Patanjali's sutras. And I had 5 years in yoga and Ayurveda with him. That was a shift.
And it was a shift in the sense, like you used the word eclectic just a moment ago. It was a shift in the sense of you made room in your mental framework for something different and something new that seemed to mesh with what you were already thinking and doing. Is that correct?
I knew early on that we didn't know too much and we had to learn much, much more.
So what do you think what's the difference in how you look at things? Because I would imagine that some of your classmates and even, medical doctors or medical students as they're getting ready to graduate now, they're exposed to different ways of thinking, different ways of doing, but they don't all, I would argue that not many respond the way that you did with, essentially open arms, even though your intent going into that first encounter in the 70s.
I came as a skeptic and I saw the deficiency in my knowledge and my abilities, and I wanted to correct that as much as possible.
And what was it about that presentation that changed your mind? Like, was it a demonstration of him working with a patient? Was it just a discussion of the philosophy of TCM?
With regard to Quing,
yeah.
And by the way, the first year he didn't look at me or speak to me. And in the second year, I could ask him, why was that true? And he said, if you can't stay away, in other words, if I can push you away, you'll drift away. But now that you're here, we can stop. And he became more and more fascinating as I matriculated through his world. There is so much to be said about that. I think the point that you're wisely making is that I was open.
Yes.
And not closed.
Yes.
Most medical, dental, chiropractic, naturopathic doctors today are taught, programmed. They are encouraged to never ask why, but just to say, the professor knows, and I shall study and memorize, and eventually maybe I'll become a professor too, or something.
Right, or something, yeah.
Or a practitioner. But if you practice from your PDA, if you practice based on symptom reactive care, the way conventional medicine is done in our country and largely around the world,
right.
Unfortunately, you will bury people at high cost, too young, with much suffering.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't feel to me like a healthcare system. That feels to me like a sick care system.
Right. And maybe that's a good transition into the white paper that you co-authored back in 2000, where you did an overview of the status of healthcare at the time. And it's, kind of interesting that the things that you wrote 24 years ago are things that are still talked about today, right? So whatever future you envisioned when you and your colleagues wrote that paper about the deficiencies of modern healthcare, how much of that do you think has changed? How much has stayed the same? And has it changed in the sense that perhaps people like you and me are now thinking and doing things outside of the system, but the system itself is still fundamentally the same? Like, what's your take on where we are now compared to what your vision was?
Where we are is the unfortunate result of the Enlightenment movement. Descartesian reductionism dominates today the thinking, the philosophy, and therefore the practice of care. That's a big mistake.
Define.
Yes, we do have biomechanical features, but life is more than biomechanical.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, in regard to relationship or nutrition or attitude or environment or many, many other topics that are a little bit subtle but profoundly important for the person in front of you, the individual, we are still treating people like statistics, and we are making statistics out of people, and I don't practice statistics, and I don't want to become one.
You mentioned Descartesian reductionist thinking. Define that for the people who are listening, and then tell me what the antidote is.
The best I can do at this, because it's a big subject. The best I can do is imagine that our universe or the earth or you are a watch. There was a watchmaker. We don't doubt there was a watchmaker. The question is the watchmaker still involved? That means, is the universe a friendly place or a capricious place? I think most medical people are inured. They are immersed in a way that says it's all over but the shouting, which means after the age of 40, you slip down the slippery slope called aging. Now, aging is an illusion of too much bad and too little good. And the oldest part of you is about 10 years old, and that's your bones. And any moment you start the process of renewal and rebuilding your body, it does. Well, if I can start with a 90-year-old who's ailing and failing and suffering and end up with a 91-year-old who's feeling vital and functioning as a 40-year-old, I think I've helped him.
So I want to see if you agree with me. Through my observation, one of the places where conventional medicine started to go wrong, I think, was probably roughly in the 1980s. And you would know because you were in practice at this point. But it seemed to me that it was somewhere around the 1980s.
Let me interrupt for a moment.
Yeah, please.
I have never sent a bill as a doctor. I have never had a private practice. I have seen many colleagues and their clients to help them understand my philosophy and my specific plan. Because if you have a philosophy, that's fine. But if you have a person in front of you, they need a specific plan that they are inspired, motivated, and informed to take one step at a time and achieve remarkable results.
So in a moment, I'd like you to maybe outline some of those steps. And I know it's probably going to vary from person to person.
There are steps that are important for everyone.
Yes.
And then there are the personalized steps for an individual.
Agreed. Totally agreed.
I can certainly talk about how you eat, drink, think, and do in relation to how you are rebuilding and renewing your health, or you're inviting illness.
Right. So back to the question that I want to pose to you about one of the places where modern medicine has gone wrong and really gone into this reductionist approach seemed to me to be somewhere around the 1980s when, at that point or prior to that point, it seemed like most medical doctors were GPs. It was more rare to find someone who was a specialist. Now I know that you do have subspecialties and subspecialties, but was it somewhere around the 1980s where it became the thing to do for
What you're
students?
referring to was a well-intended plan advocated by friends of mine to manage care more comprehensively and personally.
Yeah.
It became mangled care.
And mangled in the sense that doctors became specialists and they lost the view of the big picture?
Well, today you have hospitalists that are in the hospital only and not in the community. Community doctors who used to be able to come into the hospital are invited to stay away if they don't have privileges at that hospital.
Right.
Yes, things have become more fragmented. Yes, things have become more symptom reactive. The average person of my age is on a dozen medications, half of them for the side effects of the other half.
Right.
I am taking no prescription medicines, but I take a handful of supplements every day. And what I eat is primary, but what I supplement is necessary in the 21st century, because guess what? The rents are going up and the ceilings are coming down, as my grandmother used to say.
And I think that, ultimately the people that pay the price for how the medical system has developed, say, since about the 1980s or so, is that now you have a bunch of doctors with their, too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. And each one is perhaps very well versed in their own specialty. But again, they've lost the sight of the big picture, which seems to me that that's where you've put most of your focus, is stepping back to see the big picture and seeing it not again from a disease management standpoint, but I talk about crafting wellness, right? Wellness, being healthy doesn't happen on accident, and there are too many things that are somewhat inevitable that are going to downregulate or impair your ability to respond. And so, could you, in simple or even in complex terms, outline what your health or healthcare philosophy is? Like, even starting with simple things like how would you define health or wellness? Are they the same thing? Are they different? How are they connected?
Health and wellness are intimately connected. We can today, with 4 self-assessments and 8 predictive biomarkers, measure your functional age and whether, in regard to each of those tests, markers, you're at your best outcome personal goal value or not. And then we have a lifestyle program to get you to your best outcome goal value, because 92% of your and my lifetime health is due to lifestyle, epigenetics, not genomics, not omics. And 8% is transgenerational influences and genetics. And a footnote: if you really want to optimize your nucleus and DNA and RNA, then take a lot of antioxidants, buffering minerals, and cofactors.
Now, what's the science behind that?
Well, the science is actually ancient and recent. The science goes back to the early 20th century. We had 2 schools of thought: magic bullets, like antibiotics and anti-this and anti-that. And we had another philosophy. At the turn of the century, 1900, there were more eclectic, nature cure-oriented physicians than allopathic physicians.
Right.
Allopathic physicians looked at this and looked around, and they decided they needed to do 3 things: capture the AMA, make the AMA the voice of American medicine, and fuel this with synthetic magic compounds. The other point of view was that nature, nurture, and wholeness matter, that you can eat and drink, think and do yourself to health or to illness. And people like me have long been in the camp of speed the transition to healthful caring, one little step at a time, that adds up to big benefits to your health.
And that's there. I think there's there's almost an inherent conflict with that attitude, which I think is the right one, and the way that society and culture has developed, right? Because now we are decades past the formation of the AMA. We're decades past the introduction of the first antibiotic. We have decades and decades of, at least here in the US, lots of marketing, lots of lobbying efforts and dollars being put into our legislative process. People are inundated with the idea that if you have XYZ problems, ask your doctor if this drug is going to help you. And so I see that the message is right, but I wonder about the receptivity of the audience, about how willing they are to hear that.
I think people are willing to go by results and things that make them feel better. I will just mention in passing that for many years, the president of the AMA was named Wilbur, Wylbur, and guess what his brother did for a living? His brother was the chief of staff to the Ways and Means Commission of the United States Congress. And I was a young physician walking the halls of Capitol Hill, advocating for more scholarships and loans for nurses and doctors and paraprofessionals. I go by this door, now it's closed, and I think that's an unusual spelling. Could they possibly be related? By design. If you have a few of your people in the right places whispering in the ears of the right people, you too can be important. You can be a lobbyist. We now have so many lobbyists that they can actually rotate in 8-hour intervals for every elected person in Washington.
Wow.
That's today.
Yeah.
When I arrived in Washington, there were so few lobbyists, you couldn't find them. And they're called lobbyists because they used to stand in the lobby.
Stand in the lobby. I always wondered what that meant. Yeah.
That's what it means. And therefore, they could talk to the people who are going in and out of those rooms that they couldn't go in.
So, and not to turn the flavor of the conversation, but with the new administration that's coming in and RFK Jr. Potentially being in charge of the medical establishment by and large, are you excited or cautious or wary of some of the things that he's saying, the changes that he wants to enact? Or do you look at those things and say, well, it's about time?
Well, you hear a lot of things.
Sure.
You want to watch what happens. At the moment, many, many people have said this. We could not do worse in regard to our healthcare outcomes in America. Obesity and all the cardiovascular and cardiorenal and cancer risks and autoimmune risks that come out of diabetes. Nutritional deprivations, look at what they serve in the hospital.
Sure.
And the stress of the medical care system. Well, we calculate a minimum of 1 million lives a year that you could save at low cost and high value simply by feeding people nutritious food, by avoiding ultra-processed foods, by enjoying your relationships and life. I recommend laughing for at least 5 minutes twice a day. You don't have to laugh at a comedy. It just turned, this was chakra therapy from Patch Adams, actually.
Yeah.
But it turns out your inner landscape is greatly determined by your outer behaviors. So I live in a plastic-free blue zone bubble. I stay well hydrated. I get restorative sleep. I move around about 10,000 steps a day. I live in a kind of paradise. And I want everyone to live in a blue zone paradise. It's possible.
Do you mean one of their own creating?
Yes. The blue zones are in general. I'm talking about personal blue zones, which are under our control.
Right.
I have a choice when I go to the market. I have a choice when I bring things home. Do I ever bring food home in a plastic, styrofoam, or shrink wrap container? No. No. I buy Whole Foods.
And by Whole Foods, you don't mean the store Whole Foods. You mean
no.
You buy foods that
there
are
is
whole.
There is a chain called Whole Foods,
Right.
God bless, owned by Amazon. But no, I'm talking about what Beatrice Trumhunter, the nutritionalist, taught me. Shop around the perimeter of the market. You might find food there.
Yeah.
Be very cautious of going up and down the aisles.
Right.
Stay well hydrated, but hydrated from a tap that produces healthy water. Millions and millions of Americans are getting toxins from their tap. So I recommend measuring your tap. Now, we happen to have deep well water, 300 foot down. I have had plumbers come and say, can we take water from your house? But then I like sparkling water. So I get Pellegrino or Gerolsteiner or Apollinaris in glass. Never in plastic. We have documented what many of us have hypothesized for some time, which is that microplastic is a major health risk. Our lifespan in America is declining. The rest of the world is continuing to slowly increase. There's something profoundly wrong with our system.
Yeah, and you pointed out, and this is a statistic that's been known for a long time, but you pointed out in that white paper that I was reading that we spend more money, much more money per capita on healthcare compared to other modern countries, yet we rank far below all of them in our health outcomes and the rates of heart disease and diabetes and cardiodiabetes, autoimmune disease, and so on.
Exactly. In 1960, 6% of America's GDP went to healthcare, and 6% in Japan went to healthcare. And in Japan, what the government decided is we're going to give 6% to healthcare, and we're going to let the doctors figure out how to keep people healthy.
Yeah.
And they have among the healthiest people in the world today. In contrast, the American system now devotes close to 20% of our national wealth to patching people up and sending them back into the fray.
Right.
$4 trillion this year, of which at least $1 trillion could be used to speed the transition to healthful caring if we had new priorities. Every time there's an election, one side says we won and the other side said, well, we lost. And right now, I'm being inundated by people who would like to speed the transition from sick care to health care with a meat axe. doesn't. Imagine that I'm carrying good news and a meat axe.
Mm-hmm.
The good news might be received by people who were receptive to that good news. The meat axe is probably not the way to undo the system. So I'm glad to tell you that I have had the great good fortune to be able to talk with people who mattered, because I'm here in Washington and some people who matter are here in Washington. At an individual level, they are almost all receptive to my message, which is nature, nurture, and wholeness before, and physiology before pharmacology. Physiology, which means epigenetic lifestyle, before prescriptions. I haven't needed to write a prescription, except maybe for desiccated thyroid, which I occasionally bridge people with. I have not needed to write a prescription in the last 40 years.
Mm.
Well, I give prescriptions, but they're lifestyle prescriptions.
Sure. Right. Understood. So I want to make sure that I'm not missing what you're saying. Are you telling us that as a part of what we all hope is going to be some of the changes in healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
are you going to be part of the think tank or the process that starts to roll out change? And if so,
no. Change
okay.
happens in Washington decades after it starts.
Okay.
Yes, I have had the privilege of being on think tanks like with the Rand Institute and others, Bain Financial and Bain Capital, McKinsey. These are the people who provide the lobbyists, and I want to influence their behavior.
Understood. Understood. So back to what you were saying about changing how things are done and how we think. And I think the answer is both. But do you think that the greatest point of impact will be on creating the demand by helping people understand, like the healthcare consumer, understand your message and then shift what they're looking for and how they think about health and wellness? Or do you think it's more about training a new breed of doctors that operate within a restructured system that changes the priority? Not change, but because I think we still need to have an aspect of disease management.
Oh, no. You can't not treat disease.
Right.
But disease has a consequence, disease has a cause. When I redress or reverse the cause, the symptom and the consequence naturally goes away.
And would you say that in all cases, or do you think that there are?
Let me tell you what Olga Worrell taught me. Now, Olga Worrell was probably the best scientifically documented laying on of hands healer of the 20th century. She started the New Life Clinic in Baltimore, Maryland in 1953. Dr. Robert Leichman continues her work to this day. What Olga said to me is, the soul can always be healed. The body is another story. If you say to me, I have a multiple train wreck person with multiple pathologies treated by multiple medications, I would still say that if you had the good fortune to do for your parents or your loved ones or your child what I did for mine, because we are not low-risk people. We are not. I don't need to go into the details, but almost every family knows that there are some family traits and risks and maybe some opportunities and strengths. What we are seeing today is the consequence of many years of a very constrained system that is entirely unsustainable economically. And that will require maybe force change.
You think the money is going to speak?
I don't think the money is ever silent.
Well, my point is, do you think that the thing that will ultimately force the change is impending economic collapse due to healthcare costs?
Well, healthcare costs are increasing unsustainably, and they have been for a long time. If you consider Medicare and Medicaid and want to make them viable, you must transition to an epigenetic lifestyle low-cost program. But that transition, because it's been so long delayed, is not going to be an easy one.
Yeah. And that, that was going back to my, like, first of all, the old saying is something like, you can't turn the Queen Mary quickly.
No, that's right. No,
right.
Very well said. A big ship of state, a
Yes.
big fragment of the society, of the economy, is not going to change quickly.
Right.
But there are some examples where promoting good health has saved so much money that there are companies following suit because they want to make that much money. And I want good and well to combine.
So do you see it as almost like a long-term strategy that you must continue to try to change the system, but knowing that's going to take a lot of time and effort, you're going to busy yourself with meeting individual people where they are and helping them build that blue zone, that personalized blue zone to live their life in?
We have the Health Studies Collegium Foundation, which has done most successful outcome study in type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes and fibromyalgia. We also have the PIH Academy, which trains colleagues in this kind of healthcare. And I am devoting a fragment of my time to training health coaches, because I think health coaches will be as important a profession as acupuncturists and physical therapists, because in any world that I live in, the time of the doctor becomes very precious. And what has resulted is that most doctors only get to see people for about 10 or 15 minutes, which is enough time to say hello, write a prescription, and make some notes.
Right.
I don't think that is good care. Yes, I am doing my best on an individual basis and also on a training basis to prepare those who are ready for those who want to speed a transition to healthful caring, to know what to do for them personally.
Sure.
The health coach can go to the market with you, can show you how to make over your kitchen, bedroom, personal care, relationships, environment. There's a lot. One step at a time. I didn't make this transition in 20 minutes.
Right.
And I want to be an example. For example, I'm pointing to my garden because we don't have a front yard, but we have a 15-year-old permaculture food forest and biodynamic garden. And I go out and get parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme from the garden to add to whatever else we're making. And actually, when I go out to the garden and harvest the rosemary and come in with the rosemary, I feel like a little hero. I enjoy doing that.
Yeah. It feeds your soul, apparently.
My soul.
Yeah.
And I think most people's soul would be nourished, would be nurtured, if we did a little bit more of what we enjoy outside, better than inside, because outdoor air is always better than indoor air. But with plants and air cleaners, you can actually have healthy air, healthy water, healthy activities,
healthy mindset.
the mind and body are always in communion. They're always in intimate conversation. Your mind is listening to every thought you have. And if your thought is, oh my God, your body hears, oh my God. If your thought is, oh, I can, your body hears that too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important.
Oh, it is, for sure. I remember when I was getting ready to start my career back in the mid 90s, the field of neuropsychoimmunology was pretty new at that point.
Right.
And it was an astonishing thing for us to sit back and think, like, how you think and how you feel about things matters to your immune system. It has an impact on your immune system. And I would imagine that if you could do a survey, and maybe this has been done, but I'd be interested to hear your observations. I have my own opinions. But I would venture to say that if you looked at nonagenarians or people who live to be 100, people who come through really hard health battles and are victorious, I would imagine that they tend to be half glass full people rather than glass half empty people.
Let me pick up on what you just said. If you look at the average person from midlife until the end, there's decline. That is statistically true. It's sad, but true. I have made a study of people who reached midlife, were healthy, got sick, got well, and never looked back. My principal teacher of mindfulness and meditation was Bhante Dharmawara. We had him 30 years, between 80 and 110. And when he was 106, my colleagues at NIH were nice enough to scan him from stem to stern and study him completely. And I put all this data in front of him. He looked at it and he said, 40's a good age.
Sense of humor, too.
He had a delicious, subtle sense of humor. He meditated a lot. Oh, what a surprise that the head of the World Buddhist Fellowship would meditate.
Sure.
And I can mention that after 10,000 or more hours of mindfulness practice, your brain changes. And this can be documented in an MRI, a non-invasive study by Richie Davidson at University of Wisconsin. And Matthew Ricard was the first person in that machine. And they had to tune it, and they left him in there for about 4 hours, I think, but for a long time, longer than usual. When he came out, he said, I've had a mini retreat. Have you ever been in an MRI?
I have, yes.
They're loud.
They are, yeah. And if you're in head first, it's not the most comfortable thing.
Martha Herbert was nice enough to scan me in her 7T machine. And I came out of it saying, how come it's uncomfortable to lay there for so long? And then I said to her, I'm feeling a little washed out. And any chance we could have some orange juice and vitamin C? And she had my Nature's Ascorbate, immediately gets it, gives it to me. I feel better. I said, has anyone else ever complained about feeling washed out from the stuff? She says, you're the first person who's conscious, who's been in the machine. Okay. I'm willing to be a guinea pig in a good cause.
Sure. Yeah. Now you had mentioned about 10 minutes ago in the conversation about some assessments, and you named 8 predictive biomarkers. Some of your material that I've studied suggested 6. So it sounds like you've upgraded that model.
No. Let me clarify.
Please clarify.
Start with 4 self-assessments. These are 4 measurements you make on yourself, like your digestive transit time based on charcoal capsules, your urine pH in the morning, because that determines how much magnesium and choline citrate you need throughout the day. Your hydration status can be easily measured. And the fourth one, oh, yes, how much of nature's ascorbate does it take to cleanse you? Those are the 4 self-assessments. The 8 predictive biomarkers. And I'm not sure where the 6 came in, but it's always been 8.
Okay. Yeah, I may have misread it. That's fine.
No. We will go back and correct anything we need to correct. So with regard to the predictive biomarkers, hemoglobin A1C should be 5%. HSCRP, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, should be less than 0.5. Homocysteine should be less than 6 in the plasma. We used to recommend the lymphocyte response assay. Right now, we're automating that technology, and we have a microbiome challenge that is now the 4th biomarker. The 5th is vitamin D levels. They should be 50 to 80, not 10 to 20. The 6th is omega-3 index. Your omega-3 should be more than 8%. Mine was 13%. So I called up Bill Harris, who developed the test, and I said, is 13 better than 8? And he said, it's bigger than 8. I said, I know it's larger than 8. Is it better? He says, we don't have enough people up at your level to know.
Yeah.
We think so. But this is my point. I want to know the facts. And if we don't know the answer, we don't know the answer yet. So hopefully more people will supplement with EPA DHA that's distilled under nitrogen. Because if air oxygen gets to the EPA DHA, that will damage it.
Becomes oxidized.
And there is schmutz in the oil when you start, but if you distill it under nitrogen correctly, you remove the toxins. So, of course, I want safer supplements because I take supplements on a daily basis. And then I don't think I mentioned, but urine pH is also important in the 8 predictive biomarkers because it determines and tells you how much magnesium and choline citrate you need. So 8 predictive biomarkers interpreted to their best outcome goal value. Don't even look at the laboratory range. As a laboratorian, I can tell you that that statistic probably has little, if any, meaning for you as an individual. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But what I do is I fold the paper over so that people don't even look at the statistical range. Our predictive biomarkers are available at drrusselljaffe.com. This is an advertisement. And on YouTube at Dr. Russell Jaffe channel. And we want you to know what to test for yourself and know what the best outcome goal value is. Because while we're speeding the transition from sick care to health care, one person at a time, now is the time to take on these self-assessments and follow it with the predictive biomarkers interpreted to best outcome goal value.
It seems to me that I love predictive biomarkers, and I like to look at them in multiples and not singly and individually. It seems to me that with an approach like this, anytime you identify a biomarker that's suboptimal, that leads into some kind of a prescription. It could be supplementation, it could be lifestyle, it could be diet changes, etc. Are you able to look at all of these as a group and come up with some kind of like a composite index, or is that type of an approach not appropriate?
No. You can easily take at least the 8 predictive biomarkers, if not with the 4 self-assessments, and calculate a functional age.
And do you have a validated equation that does that, or a process that does that?
Well, our interpretation does that. And according to our best analysis, now we have to aggregate thousands and thousands and thousands of data points. It's a big project.
Right.
But in the meantime, those people, those individuals who have followed our guidance have improved their predictive biomarkers, and on average, they have gained 20 years of high value, low suffering, low cost life. So at least 20 years, maybe much more.
So I want to make sure that I'm hearing what you're saying is that taking corrective measures to improve the scores on these assessments and biomarkers can yield an increase in high quality life that may extend 20 years.
At a minimum, and
at a minimum.
That is because every one of these tests, and we surveyed 100,000 lab tests that come down to the 8 that cover all of lifestyle and epigenetics. And then, are you at your goal value or not? If you're at your goal value for hemoglobin A1C, guess what? You have a 99% chance of living well for 10 more years. If your HSCRP is correct, if your homocysteine is healthy, if your vitamin D level is healthy, if your omega-3 index is healthy, if you judge the nature's ascorbate you take based on your C cleanse each week, if you check your urine pH in the morning and adjust your doses of magnesium and choline citrate accordingly, we can add, at a minimum, now this starting with Americans.
Yeah.
This is not starting with people who are already doing all of this. I want people to do it and benefit from it, whether they're part of a study or not.
Right.
But Dean Ornish has done some elegant studies. Ocean Robbins has done some interesting anecdotal studies. I have tried to contribute to the literature. We have over 100 published articles, review chapters, and so forth, to attract colleagues, health coaches, and anyone who wants to live long and well. And now is the time. I would say when I started half a century ago, we knew from nothing. Now we know that we know from nothing, and therefore we have to rethink almost everything when it comes to personalized, primary, predictive practices and protocols applicable to individuals. My care gets very up close and personal. I don't have universal answers to universal questions. I do know that science is a tool. And when you pervert that tool, it is perverted. And when you just look at it honestly, it is vastly helpful in determining what you should measure to know how you're doing. And if you need to do better, you can.
I mean, how often are you forced to significantly change your clinical model, or is it more at this point nuances and tweaking?
Oh, thanks for asking. In the last 20 years, there has been an abundance of confirmatory information, and we haven't needed to change much. Much. Why? Because I started with the frame of reference that I wanted to know, but I did not know. I knew enough to ask questions. I knew enough to show up and practice. And I think it was the showing up and practicing that differentiated me from many of my colleagues, because it took time and effort and some little bit of resources to go around and find the people that mentored me into whoever, whatever I am today. And I'm glad to say that those who follow these simple advices and counselings, they never look back.
Never look back. Yeah.
And so if that person happens to be important or not, I don't care. You want to have friends in high and low places if possible.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So you and I have spent close to an hour now talking really more about the philosophy of health and wellness and so on. I know the topic you wanted to talk about was inflammation being a repair deficit. Do you still have time to go through that? I would love to
Oh,
hear
I
your
do.
thoughts
I
on
do.
it.
It's a good example of everything else we just been
Yeah,
talking.
that's what I was
Good
hoping.
introduction to that. Inflammation.
Yeah.
A term from pathology. And I happen to be doubly board certified in pathology. But it assumes suffering. There are 5 different flavors to suffering. I can say them in Latin, Yiddish, and English, and I don't care. You don't care? No. I want to know if your connective tissue, your collagen, elastin, and glycosaminoglycans are being renewed or not, and I can measure that. I want to know whether your liver is able to remove toxins and whether your digestive transit time is such that you can eliminate those toxins before they get reabsorbed. I want to know whether you're in a high repair mode in terms of what you eat and drink, think, and do. What does that mean? Well, I want you to have at least 40 grams of unprocessed fiber in the day, and the average American gets 10. This means that you should supplement with a raw, multiple form, unprocessed fiber that easily goes into any smoothie or stew or soup or whatever, because it's instantly dissolvable. It is in nature. And I get 50 grams a day. My ascorbate is determined by my weekly C cleanse. A doctor colleague, cardiologist, a friend, did his C cleanse and it was 18 grams, and did it the next week and it was 36 grams. And I said, oh, you're reaching plateau early. It often goes up. The C cleanse, the amount of nature's ascorbate you need often goes up for some weeks before reaching a plateau, which means you needed to do repair and you were overcoming the repair deficit in your infrastructure, in your collagen, in your body, and in your mind. I want you to breathe abdominally, gently, slowly, and deeply into your abdomen 5 minutes a day, and practice a mindfulness technique, whatever you prefer, from relaxation response by Herb Benson to any of many hatha yoga, prana yoga, tai chi, Feldenkrais. I was Moshe Feldenkrais's doctor briefly. Traeger technique. Roger Toll comes by about once a month and does a Traeger session with me that keeps me limber. And you should be able to stretch. I can, on a bad day, I can only touch my toes to the floor. On a good day, I can palm the floor. I just did this on a video, and some people were surprised that at my age, I was this limber. Well, at any age, your spine should be flexible and limber. I don't think we have time for the story, but Nada Brahmananda taught me that you could renew your vertebrae and discs. He lived at one of Dr. Mishra's ashrams, the one in San Francisco. And since I'm so far into it, I'll tell the story.
Sure.
I had heard that he could make his vertebrae knock together like castanets, and that helped him renew the bones and the joint tissue. I go to him and I say, can you do this? He says, how will you know? Whatever I say, how will you know? Pause. Then he says, well, I'm giving a concert, a tabla concert at Stanford on Sunday. I'll leave my robe open. You can sit behind me. Not only did I hear the vertebrae, I saw the vertebrae. His paraspinal muscles, which are normally very fine and don't really work terribly well, motivated. It took him some time to get into that state. That's interesting. He wasn't a sitar player. He was a percussionist, a tabla player. He was clearly in an altered state of consciousness by choice. And then I could see the vertebrae beginning to move. I could see the muscles beginning to move. I heard, like castanets, these sounds coming out of his back. And I said, you can. He says, I know. I said, how long did it take you to acquire that very rare gift and ability? He said, at least 20 years. But you'd be surprised what persistence can do to further success.
You know, it makes me think, because like from our perspective, we don't have volitional control over the intrinsic spinal muscles, which would be the ones to move the vertebrae. Well, and that's my point, because it makes me think of those people, you know, born perhaps without arms and hands, and what they can do with their feet and their toes if you train it enough. I mean, that just blows my mind.
Me too. And if you haven't seen them, look online. You can see handicapped people doing things that are truly remarkable.
Yeah.
Because they practiced. Yes, the human body is much more forgiving, much more renewing than we had ever imagined, because we've assumed you just sit in a chair for too many hours a day. Yes. If you do sit in the chair, because I do too, at least 5 minutes an hour, you should get up and stretch and look around and hydrate and converse and chuckle if you can. And then that undoes much of the harm of sitting. Sitting today is the new smoking.
Right.
We know this. Nobody seems to disagree anymore, except the chair manufacturers, maybe. But everyone seems to have caught on that sitting is the new smoking. But how do you undo that?
Right.
We specialize in what to do to undo the harm so that it doesn't accumulate within you.
So your position on inflammation as a repair deficit, you mentioned repair just a moment ago. When I sent an email to you, I tossed out an idea, like my take on this would be that you can have a sudden increase or demand on the repair process and overwhelm a normal functioning system. Or you can have a repair deficit because it's deficient, despite not having unusual exposure to things that demand extra repair capacity. Well, am I right on that, or how would I fine tune that perspective?
Let me reframe it.
Sure.
Assuming you have too much sugar stuck on your cells, assuming you have repair deficit, assuming your vitamin D is going to be continuing low, assuming your ascorbate intake isn't based on your C-cleanse need, assuming your urine pH does not tell you how much magnesium and choline citrate to take. Oh, if you do all those things, we have seen repair in the most significant autoimmune conditions. And now I'll just tell you one little anecdote, which I was peripherally involved with, but this was a man named Norman Cousins. He was a very famous editor. He developed ankylosing spondylitis, which is a very painful autoimmune condition, and he was treated at NIH. Mm-hmm. And all the therapies failed, and his doctor, Jeffrey Herzig, found out about Linus Pauling and vitamin C and wanted to give him ascorbate by vein at the clinical center. The IRB of the NIH turned it down as too risky. That was interesting. And so Jeffrey, checked Norman out of the NIH and checked him into the Hay Adams Hotel, where he watched reruns of Candid Camera and laughed and got infusions of vitamin C and came back to life. Not just came alive, came back to vigorous life. And he actually went on to start a multidisciplinary program at UCLA, which I, to a little extent, helped with, because he and I agreed that we needed more multidisciplinary, not not more narrow specialists. We needed people who could see across boundaries.
Right. Right. So do you think, like in a case like that, did you have documentable evidence of change of the ankylosing spondylitis lesions, or was
Well,
that the
no, no.
same, say,
Let
on
me,
X-ray, but function was
please,
better?
please understand. This was the 1970s.
Okay.
We could document by CT scan and others that all his vertebrae were eroding and swollen and inflamed. Today, we would hopefully have better, earlier measures. What we knew was that he was dying and then he was alive. At that point, we were just happy with the result.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really my point is that I see clients all the time where whatever metric we're using to gauge the extent of their problem, whether it's lab testing or imaging or other kind of diagnostics, we do our song and dance and people get better and their quality of life improves. And we would like to think that we've added years to their life and life to their years. Sometimes you don't know that until you're 20 years down the road. But sometimes pathology is not the right word, but maybe the degree of, say, tissue destruction or perturbation hasn't changed, but quality of life and function certainly has.
Well, let's take what is considered to be one of the worst examples, and that's osteoporosis and osteopenia. We did a study by DEXA. Over 2 years, we built new bone. This was completely unprecedented. You can slow the loss of bone, maybe by making impaired bone, but the point is that our natural approach built new bone between 2 and 12% in just 2 years.
And was that, did you leverage impact exercise and weight bearing exercise, or was this all nutraceutical and lifestyle change?
This was only to judge whether our Bone Guard formula of 20 essential nutrients would build new bone. If you did our comprehensive lifestyle program, you would get better results.
But that was just the Bone Guard from your perk company.
This was a simple trial over 2 years of 12 people, seeing if we could build new bone, and we did. And we have a bone. Sorry, we have a book on bone, joint, and muscle health with my colleague, Dr. Susan Brown, Jay Srimani, and my sister, Marcy Jaffe. And we've published some of our results to encourage other people to do even better.
So back to the repair deficit concept. You mentioned that you could assess their repair capabilities. How do you do that?
Well, you start by being a collagen biochemist.
Not an easy task.
I didn't say that this was for the faint of heart. You can today measure what are called N-telopeptides and C-telopeptides. You have to understand their limits and strengths, because sometimes they go up and that's bad, and sometimes they go down and that's good. But if you take a physiology before pharmacology approach, you can measure whether the infrastructure, connective tissue, collagen of the body is increasing or decreasing. It should always be renewing. You have to renew the bone and body, collagen, and then you have to get a liver that's healthy enough to make dicarboxy gamma glutamic acid, which is the only amino acid that builds new bone. This amino acid is released by the liver when it's healthy. It's elective protective. When the liver is under assault, it stops making this. When the liver is electively protected, it makes this in abundance, which goes to all the bones in the body. And Your bones are only 10 years old. They're constantly renewing. They are not rigid. They are actually diaphanous. They actually have fenestrations. They have little holes through which cells wiggle to repair and renew them. Amazing. Remarkable.
The GGT, I'm sorry to interrupt, Russell, but the GGT that you just mentioned, is this the same or a related compound to the GGT that we would measure just in standard blood chemistry that, we know?
No, slight difference.
Yeah.
GGT is gamma carboxyglutaminase. It was originally thought to be a liver enzyme, but it turns out it's very important in blood clotting. It's factor 13 in blood clotting.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is gamma carboxyglutamic acid, a slightly different molecule that binds calcium and magnesium, because you need both calcium and magnesium in your bones. Calcium makes things more rigid. Magnesium makes them more flexible. Do you want flexible bones or rigid bones? Well, I want both. I want bones that support me, and I want bones that are flexible.
And flex, right.
Well, if I happen, heaven forfend, to fall down, I don't want to break a bone. So inflammation is repair deficit. That's a reframing that we have been advocating for decades, and we are making great progress, except, guess what? There is much more marketing budget for pain killers than for health promoters. So I would say NSAIDs, no, too toxic. And I will just mention that there was a meeting at the FDA, and the topic was, should all NSAIDs be removed because they're too toxic? The vote was 16 to 15.
Oh, wow.
16 in favor of only putting a black box warning on, 15 who said it should just too toxic. Of the 15 that voted one way, 10 had conflicts of interest that were not disclosed. Well, you would like to think that the committees at FDA, at NIH, at CDC, at HHS are objective and independent. What planet do you live on? So I want to be as helpful as I can. I want to be a voice for physiology, nature, nurture, and wholeness, for inflammation being repair deficit, and what to do about it. What inflammation means to most people is pain and stiffness. It might mean redness and swelling. These are some of those words from pathology. What I want to know is, are you building new collagen, elastin, glycosaminoglycan? Is your liver healthy enough to provide elective protective mechanisms? Are your fluids moving regularly to deliver nutrients to the cells and take waste away? We could go many, many directions, because inflammation means accumulation of schmutz, accumulation of debris. Inflammation means a lack of repair. Well, if I don't repair my car and it stops, I need to repair my car at someone who knows how to repair the car, and then get it to start again. With regard to healthcare, a lot of it is up to the person. A lot of it really is lifestyle and epigenetics. And if you go to most doctors, they don't know about lifestyle epigenetics, about relationships, environment, about being plastic free, about eating organic and biodynamic, or growing some of your own food. Have a healthy environment, laugh, breathe, relax, etc. I don't think doctors are opposed to that. In fact, often doctors say, you're a little bit under stress, you should relax. But the doctor doesn't practice relaxation response.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor may be a few pounds overweight. The doctor only has a few minutes. He can't really get to know you personally.
Right.
I remember when the doctor who birthed you might be the doctor who buried you, right, because you had a continuous, healthy relationship. And when you walked in, he said, "Hello, I know who you are."
That's right.
Today, that's almost all gone.
Yeah.
I just went to see a doctor who happened to remember that he quoted my work from the 1970s and 80s. He was at NIH when I was there. Of course, I knew his name because he was actually a very famous guy. He's a contemporary of mine. I was so glad that he took the time to reminisce with me about our good times at the NIH. He didn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
He's very busy, very productive, very successful neurologist. And since I'm into this, I will just mention, I went to him because I have a benign tremor. I don't know if you can see this, but my right hand has a little bit of a wiggle, and I want that to go away through brain sprouting and other natural approaches. He said, "No one's ever come in asking for that." I said, "I'm the N of one." I am confident in him as a caring, competent, and comprehensive physician who happens to be a neurologist, who is interested in nutrition, who is interested in lifestyle, who is interested in getting me better. But he then said to me, everyone gets tremor at some age. Now, I think that was to relieve me of anxiety, but I don't have anxiety. I have a little bit of a tremor, and I think I know what I did to earn it. I think I do know. But the point is, I want to get rid of it. I want it to slowly go away. I don't want it to slowly increase. That's an example of taking life into your own hands as if your life mattered. Well, I can't ask a doctor to take care of me if I'm not willing to take care of myself.
Right.
And most of the information you get today is it doesn't matter what you do, what you eat, drink, think, and do don't matter until you need a prescriptive solution, and then we'll try to find the best balance of prescriptions.
How much of a black sheep are you within the medical community?
That's a good question. I don't aspire to be a black sheep or a white sheep. I aspire to be someone who speaks truth to power in a way that it does not hurt me. When we published that MSG was bad for you, Monsanto came after me.
Oh, wow.
In the 80s. When we published other similar data about the human immune system and how it responded to microplastics and other harmful chemicals, this actually happened. One of my lawyers was talking to one of their lawyers, and the lawyer said, your client is in danger of being eliminated. And my lawyer said to him, well, if you kill him, he won't be available to you when you need him.
Oh, wow.
And the guy said, that's a good point. And it stopped.
Wow.
You need friends in low and high places. If you don't like the heat, don't go in the kitchen.
How many of your colleagues that are currently practicing privately confide in you that they agree with everything you say, but they feel shackled in the system that they're in?
Oh, I hear that a lot. And my answer is just don't deal with that system. But that's not an easy answer to.
No, it's not.
No. If your reimbursement, if your compensation, if your income depends upon just signing a prescription, there's going to be a lot of incentive to just do that. And that's why I mentioned that I think health coaches are so important. They're affordable. The doctor can bless them. The doctor can say, I would like you to have a lifestyle epigenetic program, but I don't have the time to explain in detail what that really means personally for you. Jill or John over here is going to conduct a group, and you're also welcome to consult with them individually about living, not dying. If you want to know about dying, doctors are pretty good at dying.
Yeah.
I want to know about living, and living long and well. And that's why I made the study that I did of people who reached midlife, got sick, got well, and didn't look back. All of them were nonagenarians. Most of them were over 100. And bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I remember Paul Reps at the age of 99, maybe older. He came to a yoga retreat. He was joyful. He could tell a story. He could listen to a story. He could play chess. He was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And I said, how do you do it? I want to do it too. He said, I live life. I don't fear death. I think it's important to not fear death. And I had a near-death experience, which will get your attention, enough years ago that it informed me that I was good, but I could be better. And since then, I've been feeling and functioning better.
Do you care to share details on that?
Oh, happy to. At 9 a.m. on an August morning, I'm talking to the two handymen that help around here. At 9:02, I'm dizzy. At 9:05, I have paroxysmal vertigo. The world is spinning around. I'm on the floor in a fetal position. My eyes are closed. I have my cell phone in my hand. My people come running to send an ambulance to take me to the hospital. There's much to unpack in this, but I decided that this was a challenge to my spiritual development and that I should stay home, because if I went to the hospital, they would do scans and doctors would run around and things would be stressful, and all of that, especially if they were younger doctors who knew less than me, it just was not acceptable. My son drove 4 hours, and he sees me for the first time as the man down. I had been iron father, iron dad, or something, strong-willed and strong life. Okay. He triages me, brings me in the back. He literally picked me up and put me in my bed. This was all at home. And every time I started to contract, he's a Traeger practitioner, he stretched me out. For 3 days, I lay there, eyes closed, didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't pee, didn't poop. I lost 15 pounds. When I finally got up and looked in the mirror, I was gaunt.
Wow.
On the third day, Sky says to me, I'm really tired. And I said, you're the hero of this case. Go take a nap. The next day, I took a shower. The next day, with the help of my sister, Marcy, I was on a recumbent bike recovering my cardiac function, because if you just lay in bed for 3 days, a little bit of your cardiac function goes away. And I will tell you, on day 8, I flew to Europe because I had been scheduled to give a talk to very important friends near the Munich area. They were involved with German diplomacy.
Hmm.
I show up at their home. I'm still a little wobbly on my feet. They know I'm not drunk. And very politely, they ask, what's going on? And I said, well, I had this NDE and I'm recovering. And they looked at each other, husband and wife, they looked at each other and they said, are you going to talk about the NDE on Monday when our friends are coming to dinner at this really nice restaurant? I said, oh no, I'm just going to give the same talk. It'll take me months to process what just happened. And in the meantime, I'm not going to talk much about it. I have talked on occasion about it when I thought it was helpful to others to know that you can have and recover from an NDE, near-death experience. There's actually a scientific literature. There are several psychiatrists who have written about their patients who had near-death experiences. There was a guy in Charlottesville, Virginia, for many years who was studying this quietly. There often are intriguing wells of wisdom that we don't hear about in the news. There often are individuals quietly toiling away at some important issue, and if you could have time with them, they would enlighten you. I don't know if you remember the name Joseph Chilton Pearce, but he wrote a book called Crack in the Cosmic Egg. And
yeah, familiar, yeah.
And I was down at Monroe Science Institute, and a guy walks in, farmer's hip boots up to his hip, but he's the most fascinating farmer I've ever spoken with. Eventually, he goes back to his farm. Bob comes in and says, oh, what did you think of Joseph Chilton Pearce? I said, he didn't tell me who he was. He didn't need to impress me. He was just having a conversation that was of interest to him and to me. Actually, it was about frequency following responses and how your brain can be influenced by frequencies. Farmer. He wanted to be physically active so he could stay mentally active.
Amazing. So during, and you don't have to share details if these are too personal, but during those days that you were in bed contracting and making your way back to recovery, did you have visions? Did you have visitations?
No. Mine was considered to be a classic NDE. What that means is, while you're laying still with your eyes closed, your vision is from above and to the right. I could sense or see everyone that came. Lots of people came. Some people came to be helpful. Some people came just because people were coming. Some people came to find out what they might get if I picked. Remember, my eyes are closed. I'm physically not moving.
So are you non-responsive at that point? Like you're not interacting with people?
No. I never lost my gag reflex. This is very important. Sky was able to get me to swallow water. Just water. Nothing more than that. I didn't want anything more than that. I couldn't digest anything. My entire survival was at stake. But this is a very interesting part of many, many NDEs. You have a sense of vision from above and to the right that transcends your physical eyes. It wasn't with my physical eyes. It was with something mental, something in my mind that was evoked, that was enabled. And boy, was that instructive. Yes. So I learned a great deal from my so-called near-death experience.
What was the biggest lesson that came out of that?
Oh, humility. Humility.
Did you feel like you were a prideful person prone to hubris?
Enough. You know, I had punched tickets. I had accumulated accolades and so forth and so on. Yeah, I think I needed to be knocked down a peg or two to be more effective, to be able to commune with people virtually or physically, and not be so quick to know the answer, to help them discover the truth. I think I'm better at that because of the NDE.
And I think that's a hallmark of a good teacher, right? That you don't just supply the answer, you lead the questioning.
Amen. You can inform, you can inspire, you can motivate people. That's your job, my job. It's then up to them to take action. If you give them a little step that they say they can do, then ask them to come back and tell you if they did. Just asking them to come back means that you care enough about them to ask them to come back.
Right.
Very often when you see a physician today, it's a one-off experience, and the next time you're going to see another name, another person.
That's one of the reasons why I love the kind of work that I do in functional medicine is that, I've worked in my own career, I've worked very hard to find solutions to some of the deficiencies that I see and have seen for many years in conventional medicine. And one of those is not looking at my interactions with people as these disconnected, discrete events that happen randomly throughout time, but to engage in a program. I guess that's the right word, a program where we have a set of goals and priorities. We have an endpoint in mind, and we build in connecting points in between with some frequency and regularity that's meaningful enough that I can keep tabs on them. And, personally, I come to really care about the people that I work with.
I hope you do. And I hope they sense that you really care.
I think they do. Yeah.
I can imagine that they do. And I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing and inspiring other colleagues to do the same.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying.
It is very satisfying. Do you, just to play off terminology for a moment, do you consider the work that you do you consider it just simply natural medicine? Do you consider it functional medicine, nutritional medicine, integrative medicine, or do you not really care about the terminology?
I care about some words, mostly if there are companionable words. Integrative, eclectic, holistic. Okay. The words I don't like. Alternative.
I don't like that either.
Complementary. I'm not complimentary. I don't hand out compliments easily. I hand them out when they're deserved. I'm better at that. The point is, I am a reasonably caring, competent, trained physician. I can share the best of my philosophy and what I suggest you do. I would like you to know what I suggest and why, and I would like you to report back on the results. That does several things simultaneously. It leaves the locus of control with them. It makes me a resource, which I want to be, a helpful resource. People ask me, are you a healer? I don't know. You can tell me. If I've been a catalyst to your improvement and better health, you can call me anything you want, but just don't call me late for dinner.
And there's your subtle sense of humor.
Well, I learned it. I learned it in part from my mom. My mom was a successful recording jazz musician in the
Nice.
1940s when women didn't leave the block in the Bronx.
Wow. Yeah.
And she often said that she traded her summer saxophone for me and didn't get the better end of the trade. She was a classic Jewish mother, but she encouraged, nudged, pushed, made resources available to me that have enriched my whole life. So yes, I went through my period when my parents were dumb. And
Yeah,
then
we all do.
as I got older, they got
smarter.
Yes. Unfortunately, we had my mom till 83 until a doctor unfortunately killed her. We had my dad till 90. My dad had such severe nutritional cirrhosis that according to the NIH, he had a 0.0 chance. This was a time when memos were sent, a 0.0 chance of living 5 years. Wow. So we did nothing that they recommended, and we had him for another 40 years. So there's times to say yes, and there are times to say no, thank you.
No, thank you. If you were to look back and examine your perspective and your current approach in clinical model, what do you think is missing? Because I would sense that you're probably, well, I would like to think that you and I are of the same mind that we don't know what we don't know.
Oh, no. We will never know enough to know enough.
Yeah.
That's a given.
Yeah.
We're always somewhat like the person looking through a glass darkly and trying to make sense. I think that's the responsibility of a human being, is to try to make sense, including of your life. And can you extend beyond that to those you care about? There is something called the spreading phenomenon. It's been well studied in anthropology. If you get healthier, the people around you get healthier. If you get sicker, the people around you get sicker. So I want to be a change agent that catalyzes lifelong good health for individuals, will ripple through society.
Right. Well, let me just pose a couple of questions, and then I'll let you go because you've been very very generous with your time. If you had a medical colleague come to you who's fairly entrenched in conventional allopathic medicine, and they say, Russell, I'm dissatisfied. I need to do something different. Where would you tell them, or how would you advise them to begin their journey in nutritional functional medicine, whatever label you want to put on it? What would you think, what would be your best first step for them?
That's a very good question. I try to find the issue of greatest interest to them. It could be my thumb is stiff. It could be I eat something on Monday, but it comes out the next Monday. I want to find something about them that I can improve in a short enough period of time to ask them to report back. I'm almost always able to do that, including the fact, and I'll just mention a case that I'm a little bit involved with. So there's a health coach who has a friend who's been a client for a long time. I say, this is a bit complex. Maybe we should talk together, the three of us. And we do. And then she just mentions on the side that the same place in the hip that is causing her pain is where her grandmother had a fracture, and she was so poor she wasn't able to take care of it. Now, how do I use that information to be helpful in this moment? Because grandma's long gone. I said, is there any chance that your grandmother is like a spirit guide to you? She says, how do you know? I said, I don't know. I'm just asking. She said, yes. I said, ask your grandmother in your quiet, meditative, relaxed time, does she think that what I'm suggesting makes sense? Not only did she come back with a yes, she came back and said, I was scheduled to have hip surgery less than 1 month from now. I now believe there's a way to avoid and rebuild my hips without surgery, so I'm going to defer surgery. I said defer. I'm not saying not to have surgery. Right. I'm saying to be in the most engaged possible way with wound healing before any procedure is done.
Agreed. Yeah.
And for full disclosure, we have 2 chapters coming out on wound healing in a textbook next year. So I'm continuing to do my individual work, which I find very satisfying. I'm continuing to publish, which I find very satisfying. And I don't have a trust fund, so I have to make a living, like most people. And I do. I think you can do good and do well if you put your mind to it.
For sure. For sure. Russell, where can people find you if they're interested in learning more about your work, reading some of your publications, or even engaging you professionally?
Yes. Well, first of all, there are the books, including The Joy of Living the Alkaline Way, which is a free downloadable book. Then we have a book on bones, joints, and muscles. We have a book called Thriving in the 21st Century, because I want everyone to be thriving. You can look me up at drrusselljaffe.com online. You can look me up on a YouTube channel called Dr. Russell Jaffe. We post about 3 or more little recipes or blogs or inspirational, informational resources each week. I have a team of people that do see individuals or groups. I only work through them.
Yeah.
So thanks for asking, because occasionally people say, oh, I want to see Il Dottore. Unfortunately, and this I think is really unfortunate, I would have to specialize in the conditions of the rich. My time is valuable to me.
Sure.
How many more breaths am I going to take? Every month is after you have a near-death experience, you really have gratitude for getting up in the morning.
Absolutely.
And I get restorative sleep, which means I feel really well, and I don't have any devices in my bedroom. The sun tells me when it's down and tells me when it's up. It turns out that if you get up with an alarm clock, you're often getting up at the wrong time in your sleep cycle, and you'll end up being groggy that day, and you won't understand, why am I groggy?
Why? Right.
Why can't I solve a problem? Why do I have to do my work in the morning? Because after lunch, it's kind of Space Cadet City. I think you have sensed I'm inquisitive. I'm eclectic. I want to be an example of what I preach, so I preach less and I practice more. And I really do thank you for asking, because at a certain point in my career, I had the thought that we should start something like the Mayo Clinic or the Menninger Clinic or whatever, a name clinic, and build up a big activity. So I took on the Princeton Bio Center after Carl Pfeiffer passed. And it was really more than I could handle, because it was a thriving clinical research center in Princeton, in mid-state New Jersey. And I had a lab that was doing cell culture, and I had a products company that was pioneering new nutritional formulas. and I had children.
Mm.
And I wanted to spend time with my kids, because if you do, they will remember you. And if you don't, they'll remember that too. So I passed the biocenter on to Sid Baker, was at the biocenter at that time. A number of distinguished physicians were in residence there. So that was run by a foundation. I passed it on in good order. And I've devoted myself since then to this area of Virginia, where we have maybe 5 cords of aged oak to burn in the fireplace, and another 5 cords for next year already set aside, quietly maturing, drying. I mostly get to reap the benefits of this personal blue zone.
Mm-hmm.
Secret: much of the work now gets done by younger people. I want to stretch and walk. Walking turns out to be an excellent exercise. I want to be physically active. I want to be mentally and spiritually active. But I don't need to be the strongest kid on the block anymore. So I'm privileged to have people that help me execute and implement what keeps this place alive. We have an outdoor chess set. We have a sweat lodge. We have a medicine wheel. We have a wood-fired bread oven that makes really good pizza.
Mm.
And yes, it's gluten-free. It's amazing what you can do with cauliflower. And I think the most effective teaching that I do is by having people come for lunch or brunch or just for a cup of tea. Because I have a very specific way of making tea. Never in a bag. Oh, heaven forfend, never in a bag. Always loose, always herbal. And the finest white needle teas and rose petal teas, you actually brew at 175 degrees. You don't need boiling water. In fact, boiling water will evaporate some of the delicate and elegant components of those teas. Well, it's fun to make a cup of tea around here. It's not a full tea ceremony. I've gone to the Asia Center in New York. Okay. No, but you can do little versions of those proscribed, elegant approaches. So I have really enjoyed this conversation, and we have explored a number of things that I normally don't get to talk to. So
we certainly have, yeah.
I'm very grateful to you to be able to, have a dialogue with a colleague.
Well, I'm grateful for you and the time that you've given us. I will put links to all those places that you mentioned in the episode description so people can find you and your work. Dr. Russell Jaffe, you've been a delightful guest. Absolutely delightful.
My mother in heaven heard that.
Amen.